But yeah, thanks everyone for joining. I'm really looking forward to this session. There's three papers in this session. We unfortunately, the first presenter wasn't able to attend due to a personal reason, and so we're just going to have the three presenters, starting with Aditya and Abdulaziz. Their paper, or sorry, their presentation. I'm sorry, let me just get the presentation detailed up. It's okay. We'll be on From Distrust to Relationality, about designing a web platform for centering community experiences in public sector AI. So this is about an interactive web application to support people in a county in Pennsylvania, sort of understand and intervene in algorithmic systems used in local government decision making. I'm really looking forward to this. We've got good representation from Pittsburgh today. So we might kick off first with Aditya and Abdulaziz. If you want to share your screen, and I'll go on mute.
Thank you so much, Ned. I'll share my screen now. I hope all of you are able to see the slides. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're attending from. Very happy to be here. Thank you, Pears, for organizing this session. So we are presenting our work, Distrust to Relationality, which is essentially a long-term work that we have built in Pittsburgh and Allegheny County, mostly. And this is a web platform, like Ned said, for centering community experiences in public sector AI. I'm Aditya, and I have my collaborator, Abdulaziz, and my lab mate, and Akash, who's the director of the lab. He's not joined today, but yeah, Aziz and I are here. So starting with the presentation, the stakeholders in public sector AI are mostly four, as we have identified. The main actors are the public agency that consults and then undertakes the procurement of AI systems. Now, in some cases, there are specific development teams that build these AI tools for the public agency, but in most cases, they are procured from existing systems and then adapted to local contexts. Now, these AI systems are used by public agency staff, so which is the frontline staff inside these agencies which implement these AI tools in specific cases and then make decisions on the basis of them. Some of them are recommendation systems, some of them are decision-making systems. And when the people interact with public agency, they interact through these tools and the agency staff. Now, the issues and concerns, as we have identified in this ecosystem, are that there are no standardized practices for procurement, deployment, and regulation of AI systems. There's also a lack of recourse available to people when they're adversely affected, especially those at the margins. We are also noticing an entrenched distrust between public agencies and communities, and this does not really begin with AI systems. This is a long-term relationship, and the nature of relationship is such that the people, especially those at the margins, have developed a sense of, or let's say a lack of trust towards public agencies and their actions. When there are stakeholder engagements designed, these are mostly unilaterally designed and expert-driven. And what we see is that it revolves around the concerns of developing and deploying AI systems and not really concerns that are important to the people and their experiences. So this leads to a lack of meaningful participation for the people. And this is where we are trying to intervene through our web platform. The main framework that we are drawing is from this paper, Exploring Trust in Digital Civics by Corbett and Ledantic, back in 2018, which they built on a long-term work with municipal agencies in their part of the US. They propose four main strategies for building trust. Firstly, it's historicizing engagement, and then focusing on experiences of the people, mediating the expectations of how fast and how quick things are supposed to move, and then finally preserving existing institutional relationships. So I'll hand over the presentation to Abdulaziz to talk about the web platform now.
Thank you, Aditi. So So this is the platform we developed. We call it AlgoHub. AlgoHub is a web application that allows community member to learn about public algorithm being used in their city or state. But it goes beyond just informing people. It's also helping them shape their own story, experience dealing with this system. Even if they didn't have any technical background or don't have any, like they don't even realize an algorithm is involved in decisions that affect them. One of the key thing we focus on is presenting algorithm information in plain, accessible language, no jargon, no technical documentation. And alongside that, user can browse a story from other community members so they can see how others have been impacted by the same system. Next. Um, Here are there are different stage for evaluation evaluation for our project. The first stage involve participatory of civic engagement and learning system, reviewing the design through a low fidelity prototype. The second is with the local community organization here in Pittsburgh, working with a high fidelity prototype, followed by usability test. And third, bring in community member participating in focus group session and interview for further usability test as well. We believe that meaningful engagement with public sector AI require historical context based on the strategy has been provided by identity. That is we think it's not enough to just tell people what algorithm does. They need to understand how it's got here, what that's why our platform include a public algorithm registry that capture the user case, the development history, and what we call a stereotype, which is essentially a narrative timeline of how the algorithm involved. Beyond the technical side, the platform also surfaces historical aware story like real user experience and impact. So community member can see not just how this system were built, but how they are affected people lives over time. The other dimension we focus on based on the strategy we follow is experience, especially relational engagement. We don't want user to just read about algorithm in isolation. Our platform allow them to interact with other people's story so they can see how someone else experience the same system. And that's where things really important start to happen, like individual experience beginning contact into shared community concern. The goal is move people from that happened to me to that happened to us. And that shift is where real civic engagement start to take shape. Research in this field know that this kind of work doesn't happen overnight. Process incremental and long term. And that's why it's important to build on existing relationship rather than that starting from scratch. So our lab already has strong connection with the local community organization, and we are using them to facilitate ongoing conversation as well. I will handle that to Aditya to continue.
Yeah, thank you, Aziz. So like Aziz mentioned, we are basically able to undertake this project only because of a long-term engagement that Akash and the lab has built with different community organizations in Pittsburgh. Two examples are the project with Western Power, which was about reentry support, and the other one with Cassie, which is another lab at our university where they were able to build a project on 412 Connect, which is basically about associating computer science education for communities here. These two relationships and other projects at our lab were really helpful in being able to situate and mediate expectations of the community because there was a long-term experience of slow incremental work, and they were able to understand that working with this team is basically about going slow and taking things one step at a time. Finally, the way we are trying to preserve institutional relationships is in the existing ecosystem. We are introducing community organizations as an actor through the use of this platform, because community organizations are acting as reviewers of stories, and they're also leading the workshops through the infographics that we provide them and through the workshop template that we provide them, and they act as the contact point for collection of stories and expressions from the people, because they're the ones who have the most situated knowledge of the context. Finally, the early impacts that we have found in our evaluation so far are that the registry has been found to be useful, because as a reference point and just to be able to notice and judge the kinds of AI systems that we live with, what it means to live in an algorithmic society. And people have also expressed that it is helpful for community organizations because they're able to situate some impacts with existing AI systems, and that is leading to formation of a community, like Aziz said. And the formation of that community is the most important thing for us, because moving from individual experiences to a shared collective concern is where our platform really is trying to build a space. With that, we are open to questions and comments. I hope we were on time. Thank you so much.
Right on time. Great. I might just direct you, Aditya, to the comments in the Zoom chat. There was one. I'm sorry, at the start of the presentation I didn't mention, but if people want to add like reflections throughout the presentation, please feel free to add them to the Zoom chat, and then raise your hand if you have a question you'd like to ask. But Maximilian was asking initially for if you have the URL for the platform, if you could share that. There was some interest in that. But I'll just see if there's anyone who wanted to raise their hand and ask a question of Aditya or Abdulaziz.
Until then, yes, thank you, Maximilian, for that question. We are expecting the process report to be out soon, and with that, we are looking forward to share the paper in the pairs community and also elsewhere. So yeah, we'll be out with the URL along with the paper soon in the coming weeks.
Okay, good.
Thank you very much.
Just checking if anyone wanted to raise their hand and ask a question. Otherwise, I can ask a brief question. Okay, I'll ask. I was interested in, you talked about allowing some of the participants to see themselves as part of a collective, like they're not
Yes.
just sort of seeing themselves as sort of individual contributors. I was wondering about how, if your reflections on that process of how you were able to achieve that, or how that was challenging.
Yeah, I think I'll go first, and if Aziz wants to add. So what we really noticed is that when we allowed users to interact with others and their stories, what happened is they were able to suddenly notice things in their own experiences that they were otherwise unable to situate to AI systems. And that kind of awareness and the shift of awareness from just wondering why a decision went against them in a particular application, or why there was an investigation in their house, and being able to say that, oh, probably this is why this happened. And then they started reaching out to us, started reaching out to community organizations. That is where we started seeing a formation of a collective, and people also started trying to reach out to each other. I mean, we don't really have concrete examples of people reaching out directly, but through community organizations, mostly because we are ensuring anonymity on the platform. We are making sure that no identifiable information is shared along with the stories, which is where the community organizations are coming in very strongly and helping as reviewers before any story or a comment goes out on the platform. Yeah.
Thank you,
Aziz,
Aditya.
do you want to add anything to that?
I think you give a general picture for the question. I don't have anything to add here. Thanks.
If I may add, sorry for interjecting, but one of the historical reasons on this is that oftentimes when communities in the margins experience harm, it's seen as a personal experience, right? Like, so by bringing it out there, kind of showing it that this is not an individual's experience and that there is others in it. There has been many of these movements within Pittsburgh where this work is situated, where organizations have tried to create a movement for collective action by showcasing this different individual experiences. And that's where we're trying to build this sense of community with. Right now, we've seen this with police accountability early on. We've similarly seen this with like mayor's office work in public decision making. In all of those, like trying to go from the personal experience to a collective experience. That's the first like direction that we're trying to take here.
Thank you, Akash. Okay, great. Well, I think we'll move to the next presentation, but just want to say a big thanks to Aditya, Abdulaziz, and Akash. That was a great presentation, a fantastic, impressive platform. And moving across the road in Pittsburgh, we'll go over to, we've got Shrivali. Did you have a question?
Hi, hello. I did have a question. Could I raise it?
Yeah, I just a quick one because we'll have to move to the next presentation in
Yes.
about a minute.
Yes, my question was just that this website, this web page that has been developed right now, it seems to be moving in the correct direction in increasing community trust. However, I was thinking about its scalability and the kind of public agencies that we are envisioning who might take up this, make use of it. I think this is something that might be effective only if the community is like very small and localized. If it were to be scaled to a larger, say, city, where even if people were then engaging on the website and they were posting their concerns and their stories with the interaction with the AI models, I don't understand how if it will have the kind of effect that we are envisioning with this paper. Because again, if it is scaled, then it will create that same feeling of parasocial relationship rather than real like feeling of community and that we are actually engaged in it. Even if we are trying to create that registry or we are trying to document our engagement. I was just thinking how it might just end up being like a social media just interaction, like you'd find on some social media. I don't know if that makes sense, what I'm trying to say.
Did
Thank
you
you
want
so
to
much
give
for
your
that question.
if you
Yes,
just want to give
and
your
I think
brief
maybe
thoughts?
Akash would also. Thank you, Ned. And thank you for that question. This is something that we are also grappling with. And in fact, Akash, Aziz, and I were talking about this scalability issue just yesterday when we were thinking about the long-term goals of the platform. And I think the way we are trying to approach this is we are looking, instead of looking at generalizability and scalability, we are looking at possibility of transferring and transferability of the community. Because when we look at a community being formed around a small set of algorithms and they are able to notice these algorithms, judge their impacts in their lives, we are hoping that this will also translate to them being able to question and them being able to raise similar concerns for something that is much larger than themselves, maybe even beyond public sector AI. And that's the way we are trying to approach this problem at this point. And of course, we are also conscious that if we have a lot of text data, a lot of comments and interactions on the platform, how are we going to handle it? And this is a question that we are still thinking about. But thank you so much for bringing it up. Maybe Akash would want to take a quick stab at it. No? Okay.
Great stuff. Thanks very much, Aditya. Okay, we'll hopefully have like 5-10 minutes at the end. We can also have a broad discussion across the presentations, but we'll move now to Wesley Deng from Carnegie Mellon University talking about WeAudit, which is a end user auditing. I think it's a workflow and a system. So I'm really looking forward to this presentation. And over to Wesley Deng.
Great. Thank you so much, Ned. Hi, everyone. My name is Wesley. So let me start it. My cursor. Great. Can everyone see my screen? Awesome. Yeah. Hi, I'm Wesley. I'm a PhD candidate at CMU Human Computer Interaction Institute. I had an undergraduate degree in computer science at UC Berkeley. Drawing from human computer interaction and AI, I build tools and processes to support AI safety and responsible AI practice in industry settings with a specific focus on AI auditing, AI red teaming, and impact assessment. So today I'm going to talk about one of my main PhD projects called WeAudit. The goal for WeAudit is to develop a platform really a participatory platform to effectively scaffold diverse users in auditing, evaluating Gen AI, both individually and collectively, while ensuring their findings are actually actionable for model developers. The initial motivation for this project is really us realizing the power of users in AI audits, complementing the limitation of AI experts and internal AI teams. For example, a few years ago, we have this wildly publicized incident where Twitter users noticed potential racial biases in Twitter's image cropping algorithm, and then they came together to synthesize and systematically test their hypothesis about AI biases. In a more recent case, with Google's Gemini, we observed a very similar pattern where users collectively surface industry AI teams' blind spots. And whenever this happened, tens of thousands of end users coming together to raise awareness, audit different variations of inputs and outputs, they surface new issues and collectively validating their hypothesis about why and where AI might fit. And all these resources are incredibly valuable for practitioners to improve their AI products even before deploying their AI systems. Recognizing the power of users in conducting AI audits and evaluation, our team has been trying to expand the existing practices of AI auditing to a new type of AI audits. We call it user-engaged AI audits, or simply user audits, where end users are being directly engaged in the AI auditing processes by leveraging their unique situated knowledge and experiences. Now, while our team was working on user audits, we also realized that many major tech companies have also started experimenting with ways to directly engage users in auditing their AI systems. As I'm highlighting here, Twitter's Bias Bounty Challenge and OpenAI's feedback contest. Other companies such as Hugging Face, Google, IBM, Apple, they have their own version of user audits, which leads to a question, right? How might we develop tools and processes to effectively scaffold users in auditing AI while ensuring their findings are actionable for AI practitioners? This is a question I often encounter when I'm actually chatting with practitioners on the ground when they are working on user audits. This is why we designed and developed WeAudit to bridge the gap between user auditors and AI practitioners. At a very high level, WeAudit is a workflow and a corresponding interface that supports end users and third-party organizations in auditing AI both individually and collectively. WeAudit supports users in noticing and reflecting upon potential AI harms and in articulating their findings in ways that industry practitioners can act upon. So we don't have time to go over the entire system and the finding, but to just quickly give you a sense of the current system of WeAudit, to start with, one of the core features in WeAudit is this pairwise comparison feature, which allows user auditors to inspect the outputs of different prompts side by side. As you can see here, if we put successful doctors versus successful nurse, we can see the gender distribution of the image output is shifted. I also implement a history sidebar so that auditors can revisit their past exploration and really enable them iteratively refine their prompts to audit the model outputs. For auditing or red teaming, it's actually quite common for the users to run out of ideas on what prompt to explore next. I also implemented multiple scaffolding mechanisms within WeAudit to better scaffold user auditors in getting inspirations on what to audit. This includes some examples we prepared in advance, but we also implement features so that users can see what others are doing and auditing in real time. For example, what are some most explored and underexplored topics by other users? And this idea of social augmentation is inspired by a lot of HCI work in social media research. Once user auditors find anything potentially problematic, such as harmful biases, inappropriate images, or misinformation, privacy intrusive, user auditors can click the report button to expand the audit report portal. We co-designed this audit report portal with industry AI practitioners to capture what model developers would want to hear from users beyond just a binary ranking. And this includes what users observed could be harmful. Why do they think this could be harmful, and to whom, and potential mitigations user would like to see. All the reports are posted to a discussion forum where users can view and comment on each other's reports. I think this discussion forum is also a very unique part of WeAudit. People are already doing this on social media, right? Participatory. When Google Gemini comes out, tens of thousands of users surface issues Gemini images generated. But when I'm presenting WeAudit to our partner at Google, they told me that they really wish they have this discussion forum internally so that they can observe how people react to their model and surfacing internal AI teams' blind spots pre-deployment. Finally, to understand whether a given observation in a user audit report is perceived as potentially harmful by multiple people and developer themselves, and also to assess the overall quality of the report, we designed a verification process where other user auditors or data annotators could assess the submitted user audit reports along different high-level criteria throughout a survey. Once we have the WeAudit system, we conducted a series of user study with both users and industry practitioners. So for the output, this includes multiple award-winning paper published at top HCI and AI safety conferences. I'm showing you the one that's primarily focusing on the collective intelligence or participatory part of WeAudit published at last year's CSW conferences. But I didn't stop at just writing papers. I also built developer-facing interactive dashboards to show tangible audit insights to real-world industry AI teams. For example, I presented this interactive interface I'm showing you on the left in front of Apple's VP-level leadership for responsible AI, and they loved it because it's highlighted which overlapping topics had already been extensively covered by the current auditors and which areas required more attention. The Apple folks feel that these insights were extremely helpful in uncovering blind spots and guiding them their internal and external red teaming processes. When evaluating the overall impact of WeAudit, we looked at three key dimensions: user engagement, industry influence, and research recognition. Starting with user engagement, the platform has successfully coordinated collective auditing efforts at scale. To date, over 150 end users have contributed to more than 200 hours of auditing, generating more than 10,000 adversarial prompts and over 500 detailed reports. These findings are not just theoretical. They have been validated by industry practitioners and used to directly inform their model updates. Beyond professional use, WeAudit has also become a global educational resource. This is when academic collaborators coming in, they use WeAudit with over 1,000 students in 23 universities to enhance students' AI literacy, thinking about the impact towards themselves and thinking through the potential harms of Gen AI towards students themselves, but also to people they know and they love. In terms of industry influence, our research has directly shaped the design of AI safety and responsible AI tools and internal policies at leading tech companies. This is often through formal collaboration, but also consultancy or presentation in front of these companies' VP leaderships. As I mentioned so as a project lead, I've also initiated and sustained critical external partnership with many organizations, including all these companies. Finally, our contribution has been deeply felt within the research community. This work has received 4 Best Paper Awards at top-tier HCI and Responsible AI conferences, alongside 2 International Design Awards. The academic rigor has also been further supported by fellowships and academic research programs from many leading tech companies. So our hope is that other researchers and practitioners can implement their own system based on general WeAudit workflow. And in the meantime, we have also been doing follow-up work based on WeAudit ourselves. So for example, in one of our projects published at last year's FACT, we customized WeAudit to engage a group of youth in conducting Gen AI audits. As you can see here, we tailored the curated examples to topics our young participants could relate to, and the audit reports were made more lightweight and whimsical with emoji reaction. I was very pleasantly surprised by how quickly kids were able to onboard to the auditing activity, bring their hobbies and backgrounds into the auditing process. Some even commented that the model felt really old because the model didn't understand their slang, and I felt personally attacked since I have no idea what they're talking about. In another project, we have been exploring how to incorporate different visual and LLM-driven guidance to support more systematic auditing of GenAI model. And this interface is, as you can see here, is much more complex than the current WeAudit interface designed for regular user, since the target audience here is AI practitioners with extensive experience evaluating models they developed at scale. One of our key contributions is a pipeline for generating scene graphs from a large number of AI-generated images, and I encourage you to check out our preprint if you're interested. This work is going to be published at this year's CHI. Finally, as I mentioned repeatedly, people can bring in their lived experience to auditing and evaluating AI systems. But what factors influence how they rate harmful AI behaviors? We conducted a pre-registered controlled experiment to investigate what factors, such as participants' gender, race, familiarity with AI, and media exposure to societal and AI-related biases, can affect their rating of harmful behaviors. This work was being published at HCOM, and please check out the full paper if you're interested in the results. So overall, my hope is that the WeAudit workflow and platform can become the beginning of the conversation and efforts towards building future participatory platform that can coordinate user and practitioners' collective efforts by leveraging their complementary knowledge and expertise. So that's the end of my talk. Happy to answer any questions. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Wesley. Very impressive piece of work and contributions to the research community. I'll start. We don't have any questions in the chat or any reflections in the chat, rather. But if anyone wanted to raise their hand and ask questions of Wesley, now's the time. We'll just see if there's any questions coming up. Otherwise, I can kick off. Okay, well, I'll start. I had a question. I was really interested in you mentioned the part of the motivation of this was the various like feedback competitions and the like that OpenAI used as part of the ChatGPT release, and other models were trying to get feedback from people to identify concerns. I was interested in how like your system, you see this kind of system being incorporated into those kind of very large public-facing products, because one of the things I found interesting about that feedback competition early days was they were after this kind of social and ethical type feedback, but some analysis I've read about it was that they got a whole bunch of performance-related feedback, like my response wasn't quite what I wanted, but your system seems set up to kind of get that the more sort of social and ethical feedback from participants. I was interested in how you see this product being incorporated into those, more public, broad-facing products, if that's the kind of intention for it.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. We have been thinking about this a lot. I think there are two layers of kind of answering this question. To start with, I think the auditors in our platform also actually look at the quality of the image output as well, right? So the scaffolding mechanism actually also touch upon the model output quality as well. But to directly address your question, thinking through how WeAudit workflow and interface or features on the interface could be incorporated into the company, when we are having this conversation with a lot of companies, either through formal user study or consultancy, they realize that there are many features that they would like to bring into their own either internal data annotation platform or evaluation platform. For example, many of them actually implement the pairwise comparison part. And then they also have the internal discussion forum as well. A lot of them, it could be a group session with the red teamers in their team, right? And then to kind of tackle the question on ethical and social concern, I think one issue we anticipate would be, what if model developers or industry team wouldn't want to make any changes, even the users or their internal teams find ethical issue because they are for-profit company. They wouldn't change the things for just based on end users' result because they're profit driven. So beyond incorporating this often internally to the industry platform, I think a lot of time we have been thinking about how do we collaborate with government agency, for example, NIST, or nonprofit organization, and having this platform as a third-party interface rather than directly engaging or incorporating it into the company served as first party or second party auditing platform. But again, all of this requires a lot of resource and time. This is why, this work has been ongoing work for 2 to 3 years, and a lot of other folks at CME are still doing this. So hopefully in the future, we'll have some even more substantial collaboration with nonprofit and government. Yeah.
Yeah, great answer. I think that's an interesting sort of positioning for it as a sort of a third party tool, and separate from the up down thumbs and that sort of feedback.
Yeah.
We had a question in the chat from Maximilian. Who's paying for the WeAudit work currently, and who do you think should be paying for it? Perhaps ongoing.
Yeah, just to unmute and clarify that. I mean, because I know that perhaps it should be the responsibility of model developers to be leading these participatory efforts themselves, and so sometimes if it's funded by civil society or nonprofits, it can be seen as a kind of like tax imposed on people who shouldn't be having to pay this. But yeah, those are questions. Who's paying for it now, and who in the ideal world do you think would pay for this?
That's a great question, Maxim. So we have been casting a broad net to try to secure funding support, right? But maybe not surprisingly, most of the funding support we're getting are from company as I listed here. All these companies, they have their own AI model, and when they see WeAudit, they're like, okay, we can collaborate. Either, we provide part of the WeAudit to incorporate their internal team, or having conversation with their team to think through how to improve their internal evaluation pipeline. We didn't get enough luck to secure any funding support from nonprofit, which we believe we hopefully could secure some. And I think the funding issue is a really important part, right? Because, when we're receiving funding from industry, a lot of time, when showing the result, our hands are also tied. It's the golden handcuff problem. I do think a lot of time, government and nonprofit, if we can have collaboration with them, this would give us more agency and freedom to maybe pushing WeAudit towards a more civil society and public facing and truly participatory platform. But this is something that we have been trying. Yeah. So the short answer is currently it's mostly industry, which we don't think it should be. But yeah, we're trying.
Thanks, Wesley. I'd just check if anyone had any final brief questions before we move to the final presentation. No, it looks like that. Well, thanks very much, Wesley. That was a great presentation and impressive, catalogue of work. We'll now move to Maximilian Kronedale, who's presenting on Deliberation Bench, a normative benchmark for the influence of large language models on users' views. So this is about a benchmark for assessing the influence of large language models on users' belief using the deliberative online opinion polling process. So I'll hand over now to Maximilian.
Thank you so much. I'm just trying to move other things out of the way so it's easy to see the slides here, and hopefully this covers it pretty well. Great. So thank you very much. My name is Maximilian. I'm a recent graduate from the Oxford Internet Institute and a Winter Fellow at the Center for the Governance of AI in London. And I'm really excited to share Deliberation Bench with you all. This is a bit different, I think, from some of the other presentations you've seen today. The paper with my co-authors, Luke Hewitt and Paul, it's a creative attempt to create a kind of normative benchmark for large language model persuasiveness. And it's unusual for two reasons. One is that it relies on human deliberation as its empirical grounding. But it's also kind of unusual in that it takes a stab at trying to define what quote unquote desirable influence might look like if you share some of the assumptions that we have. The QR code, by the way, is a link to the paper, which is going to be published in the archival track at ICI next week, but this is what we have for the moment. So before I talk about the participatory aspects, I just want to motivate the problem that is driving this work a little bit. So it has been pretty well established now empirically that talking to AI chatbots influences our views on many different topics, including political topics. And this is raising concerns across the political spectrum about the use of, potentially AI to manipulate people or persuade them or misinform them, but often the concerns are coming in opposing directions. So, for instance, progressives have been concerned for a long time about biased responses from models. There was a study in Germany not too long ago that found that ChatGPT and other models persuaded or instructed and advised women to negotiate for lower salaries than men in kind of starting negotiations. And almost at the same time that that study came out, the US White House was signing the executive order on preventing woke AI, expressing concern that models are too left-leaning and stating that they won't procure models unless they are quote unquote ideologically neutral. So there is a real tension here. If we can't decide in which direction to, models should be persuasive for users, then you could say, well, perhaps, LLMs shouldn't be persuasive at all, but that isn't practically feasible or desirable. For one thing, LLM influence isn't inherently bad. So if a chatbot gives you accurate, empirical information in response to a prompt, and also perhaps new arguments about a particular policy, and as a result, you happen to change your mind, that actually seems like probably a good form of influence. But since, at least superficially, we don't seem to agree about what types of influences we want and don't want, especially on fraught political topics, that makes studying LLM influence and particularly shaping that influence a political landmine, basically, for AI companies. So what we thought would be needed is, and what we think is definitely needed, is a defensible or legitimate way to determine what quote unquote good influence looks like in the world of LLMs. So that's where my co-authors and I started looking toward another kind of influence on people's views that has a track record dating back to the 70s, and that is the practice of deliberative polling, which is like other deliberative mini-publics in that it brings a random sample of a public, usually representative of a country, to discuss an issue. The format is a little bit more structured in that participants are surveyed on a set of predefined proposals. Like should we increase the minimum wage to $20 an hour, for instance, from a scale from 0 to 10, strongly opposed to strongly disagree. And then, as is typical for other deliberative processes, the participants break into small groups. They are briefed with vetted and balanced information written by experts. They have the chance to ask questions of experts in a panel, and they do this discussion for hours or even days. And in other words, you could say that these participants are put through a process that has a very democratic way of shaping their views as participants. The key feature of deliberative polls that is useful for our purposes is that the participants are surveyed before and after deliberation. So this gives us a way of measuring opinion change. And this was an inspiration for us for a certain kind of benchmark. So the deliberation-based benchmark or deliberation bench, the core idea for this idea is to say, or to ask the question, what if the influence of that LLMs exert on a user in a particular conversation should be similar to the influence that that user would have experienced if they had participated in a deliberative poll on the same topic. So just to say that again, like, what if the influence from an LLM was similar to the influence that a user would have experienced from being in a deliberative poll on the same topic? That's the kind of normative and empirical claim being made here. And we think there's a bit of there's a normative appeal to this, which is that opinion changes, that occur in deliberative polls, well, A, they're fairly common empirically, but B, they're probably resulting from kind of virtuous or desirable influences, like new and reliable information and reflection and discussion with peers and interlocutors who don't agree. And certainly there are biases in groupthink at play as well, but the way in which these deliberations are designed has been thought through pretty carefully and is an attempt to mitigate those biases at the very least. And then secondly, this process or way of changing minds has a claim to procedural legitimacy, and as a result might appeal to people on different sides of the political aisle. So that's the foundation of the idea for the deliberation benchmark. So to put this kind of idea, the deliberation-based benchmark, into practice, we needed two types of data. First of all, we needed data for our benchmark, which for that we partnered with the Deliberative Democracy Lab, and we had access to 4 major deliberative polls between 2019 and 2023. That included 2 types of issues, 6 topics related to US policy things, so things like tax rates, benefits, climate emission caps. And the latter 6 are AI-human interaction topics that are from a partnership between Meta and Stanford. And we're focusing on the US here, but there's no reason in principle this couldn't be done for other countries, and deliberative polls have been run in dozens of countries around the world. And then our second data source that we need in order to evaluate LLM influence against this benchmark of data is our own persuasiveness experiment. So we actually recruited 4,000 Americans and randomly assigned them to be asked the baseline questions for the same topics as in the deliberative polls. So asked baseline questions for one of the 12 topics. And they then rated their views. They were redirected to have then a chatbot conversation with one of 6 randomly assigned LLMs, GPT-5, Gemini, Claude, Grok, Llama, and DeepSeek. There was also 2 types of conversations. So there was a treatment group, which was most of the participants, and they were asked to have a conversation with the chatbot about one of the topics they'd just been asked about, for example, like US tax benefits or something. And in the control group, participants were asked to have a conversation about an unrelated topic, like travel. After the conversation, which lasted about 10 minutes on average, participants were sent back to the survey, and they were asked for their end-line views on the exact same questions as the baseline. And so in this way, we were able to understand the direction and the magnitude of the influence of talking to a chatbot on participants' views on every topic. So getting to the results a little bit here, our research question was, is the magnitude and direction of the average opinion changes in LLM conversations, does it mirror what we see in deliberative polls? Because if it does, that might be a good thing, and if it doesn't, that could be a red flag. I'm just going to talk about 2, or maybe if we have time, 3 key findings, but you can read the rest in our study. So the first is that the impact of LLM conversations was positively associated with those from deliberative polls. And that means that if in a deliberative poll, people tended to reflect on some issue and update their views in a particular direction, then we find that getting people to talk to an LLM about that same issue tends to bring about the same direction of change in attitudes. And we find this association both across the US policy issues and across also this other set of proposals about AI attitudes. And importantly, there's no association like this in the control group. So we can attribute this kind of this view change or this positive relationship to talking to the chatbot specifically about these topics and not just talking to chatbots in general. Also, we found the difference between the models themselves was actually pretty modest, which is a little bit surprising to us. Even though people rated, their experiences differently, we asked those questions as well. Some people enjoyed some models more than others. The actual magnitude and association with deliberative polls was pretty similar across the models. And this is actually somewhat aligned with other research that shows that on bias in LLMs that shows that the biases and the political biases between LLMs tend to be quite similar, even though we pull out these particular anecdotes where some of them sound better or worse than others. So both of these initial findings seem fairly promising to us. One perhaps more negative finding, which is to do with polarization, is in deliberative polls, it's not uncommon to see participants become less politically polarized over the course of deliberation. For example, in the American One Room series of deliberative polls, Democrats and Republicans, their differences shrank over the course of the event. But we didn't find any evidence of a political depolarizing effect like this from talking to LLMs. Happy to talk about any of this stuff more if you'd like. But just to close out, I'm about 10 minutes here with some reflections. So we've showed that the LLMs in their default configuration already do influence people. And we've also shown that there's some mirroring, although not a total similarity, between talking to an LLM and the influence from deliberative poll. But what I would like to argue is that this kind of process-based approach, or this deliberation bench, for example, could be a new way to monitor the persuasiveness of LLM influence over time based on deliberation data. So, for example, as new deliberative polls are run and future persuasiveness evals are conducted, if we find that any frontier models have a negative or a 0 correlation with deliberative polls, that might be a red flag and suggest we should scrutinize that model further and take a closer look at it. And again, just broadly, we think this process-based approach to deciding on LLM influence is appealing because it doesn't require people to agree on the direction in which an AI model should influence user views on any particular topic, but just on whether the process by which those views are changed is a legitimate one. So it moves the kind of focus of AI guardrail debates or content moderation debates upstream from particular LLM outputs to procedures for legitimate influence. And that's the idea we'd like to disseminate and hopefully get to stick. All right, I'll stop there, but that's the QR code for the paper and would love your thoughts on it.
Well done. Great presentation. That was fascinating work. We do have a question in the chat. Actually, I'll just check if Akash, did you want to unmute and ask your question directly?
Oh, it was less of a question and more of an exploratory thought on
sure.
it. I was wondering, it's just a speculation, what would happen if we deliberately contested? I mean, in the last findings that you showed, right? It seems like, and as the subtitle says as well, there seems to be psychophancy at play, right? In terms of um, uh, if we create LLMs that are deliberately contesting or pushing back on the deliberation, in this one, thank you, on the
Yeah, sorry.
depolarization, if we had contestation built into the conversation, on how human conversations would be, do you think we'd be able to know what the effect of the psychophancy could be?
Well, I think that's a very good question, and this was one of the questions that we had not really pre-registered. It's kind of more of an exploratory question than anything, but this polarization result has been the thing that most people seem the most interested in, and so we're thinking about diving in a little deeper because I do basically think that you could improve this if you really tried to reduce polarization. We did not do any prompt engineering. Our goal was to actually minimize the system prompt as much as possible so that we could say something like, this is what a default configuration of a chatbot tends to do in this situation. But imagine we had tried to say no, remind the participant of opposing views and, gently push back on them while acknowledging their perspectives in some long evidence-based brief. I bet you probably could do a little better than what we've done here. So I think it's a worthwhile route for investigation and something that that isn't answered by our study. It's just a question.
Thanks.
Great. Okay, I'll go next to Wesley, who had his hand up.
Yeah, thank you so much. This is fascinating work, Maximilian. I'm curious about your thought on kind of the human AI collaboration aspect of deliberation, because Grok is kind of on X right now and having in a conversation with people. I'm curious about your thought on exploring further experiments to think about, okay, what if we have an LLM to facilitate human deliberation, and also maybe thinking about now we have the benchmark. What's your potential next step to incorporate these results into the actual model output changes?
Yeah, let me take those questions in reverse order. So for next steps, I would like to try to institutionalize something like this. Well, first of all, I want to get feedback from labs, who is they are the main audience here, and ideally a more kind of lab that's concerned about safety or perhaps persuasiveness would be willing to do something like this and put it in its model card and commit to following up on a regular basis. Um, uh, I'm also interested in the feasibility of running new deliberative polls because we had to look a few years back, and so they start to become less relevant over time. So could we prioritize new deliberative polls that are specifically on the most salient high leverage topics for LLM persuasiveness, for example? That would be an interesting question. So those are some next steps that I'd like to do is talk to the labs, figure out the feasibility of implementing and institutionalizing this, giving it a home in a place like ML Collins or Commons or Transluce, for example. And sorry, what was the second question? Or the first one?
Oh, the experiment design in terms of having LLM incorporated into the human deliberation and maybe the setup for different experiments.
Yeah, I mean, for that, I'm going to riff a little bit more on personal experience because I'm not sure if this study will shed too much light. I think that there's certainly people are exploring the use of LLMs in deliberation. I think it's just not exactly obvious where it goes. It's useful for briefing participants. Potentially Stanford has created a chatbot to help people understand the briefing materials if they didn't read it all, and it only pulls from the briefing materials and cites footnotes. It's also can be useful for understanding the transcripts and providing results. But whenever people so far have tried to embed it into the like synchronous conversations, it doesn't go super well. Like it seems easier so far to just not have a facilitator than it seems to have like an LLM's facilitator. I think people will work on that and hopefully it will get a little better. Um, and maybe it could do a good job, but for now, I think that that's still a little ways away.
Okay, we'll have a final question from Shribali.
Hello. I was absolutely fascinated by this paper, and I kept going back to the initial question that you raised, which was that should LLMs be persuasive? And okay, I have a few thoughts on that. That first, when you say that when you try to compare the AI influence to democratic deliberation, the two things that kept coming to my mind was that there's a very specific distinction between the two, which is that in our democratic deliberation, we do not have the assumption of the factual accuracy that we have when we are chatting with this AI chatbot. We like I think there's difference in dynamic that it's similar to if I were a layman talking to an Harvard expert on a specific topic. I would give them there'll be that assumption in my mind that they are more factually accurate and my thoughts will be more likely influenced. And also there would be a missing affective aspect and just not the cognitive component, which is present when we are interacting with AI versus when we are interacting amongst people in a democratic deliberation. Which is also linked to the fact we talk about how the why we notice a lack of depolarization in interactions with chatbot, because a lot of times when we are interacting with chatbot, it's more it's as if we have information gap and we're just trying to fill that while interacting with the chatbot because we believe in its factual accuracy, and we just try to fill an information gap for what already aligns with our existing beliefs, and thus creating that echo chamber effect due to that psychophantic AI. So yeah, I was wondering with the question that Akash raised, that even if we were to create a specifically contesting AI, we would still be more influenced and we might not argue back as strongly as we might in when we're interacting with people because of that assumption of accuracy of AI. And I think that is a little too much power to be given to just a model. Yeah, I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Sure. I mean, certainly there's a lot there. And we, we're not advocating, like some people have looked at this result and said, oh, so what you're saying is we can use LLMs to replace deliberation since you have a positive relationship between the two. That's definitely not what we're saying. We're just saying that it's a good thing, and certainly at least it would be a bad thing if there was a negative relationship between the opinion changes in deliberative polls and the opinion changes from talking to an LLMs. Like that's the starting point we're trying to get people to talk about. I think the assumed factfulness or factualness when talking to chatbots is an interesting question. It's an empirical one. It could be that people over time are starting to realize that it makes, hallucinates. Certainly when I talk to a chatbot, I treat it as like a pretty well-educated friend, but I don't assume it's right. So I think that's a worthwhile empirical question. And then for the missing affective piece, I totally agree. I think that's something that you do not get from the LLM component, or just talking to an LLM, or you probably wouldn't. I guess it is still an empirical question, but you're right that one of the biggest aspects. So when I talked about depolarization and political depolarization, I was talking about viewpoint depolarization, but you're right that there is another component of affective depolarization, which is like, how much do I like kind of hate my interlocutor, or do I just think that they're wrong even though their heart is in the right place? And I don't expect that talking to LLMs would move that measure. We didn't even ask that measure because we didn't expect it to move. We only thought it would move the viewpoint element. So that's another reason that I think you would continue to want to have regular deliberative polls, as that probably we wouldn't be affected by LLM conversations.